Hey guys, OJ here, bringing you guys yet another episode of our Draft League tier list. This week we are going over Gen 2 as we went over Gen 1 last week. This will be a little bit shorter video and I'll have some pretty interesting takes. And this is going to be a really interesting tier list because one, Gen 2 is really small. It's a very small generation. And two, it feels like one of those generations where Pokemon are either incredible and very good or just downright dog shit. So it's going to be really hard to rank these guys relative to each other and relative to a general draft metagame. I'll do my best. There's a lot of Pokemon I love in this genre, and there's a lot of Pokemon that are just absolutely terrible. So we might be adjusting it as we go and things like that. But if you guys do enjoy this week's tier list, be sure to drop a like on the video as well as subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 5,000 subs by the end of the year, and I'd really appreciate it a ton if you, subbed and helped us out along that journey. And yeah, with that being said, we can kind of jump right into it. First up, we have Meganium. And again, this might be a Pokemon you'd think you would put in D tier, but comparative to the other things that are in this generation, I think this is a low C tier Pokemon. I've seen a lot of it really come up recently this gen. I've seen in a lot of team tour settings, like in DPL, we have a team with Meganium. I saw last week another team had a team with Meganium. To where, like, low tier Meganium with Terra, if you have the extra points for a lower tier Terra captain, it's pretty viable. It got moves like Knock, and it's just decently bulky, despite having a pretty shallow move pool. It's a good ground check for its price point, so I think it'd be kind of dishonest to put it anywhere other than at least low C, at least me personally. Next up, we have Big Typhlosion. I'm thinking these guys, again, I think this is relative to this tier list, right? I think if I put a lot of these Pokemon in other tier lists, they'd be much lower. But relative to what is in the Johto Dex, I think these guys are both in B tier. Typhlosion's going to be a stronger, like, Eruption Scarfer / Specs user, right? With a stronger speed tier. But Hisuian Typhlosion, I think, is a better overall Pokemon. And I've seen it have some success in, some Terra formats and things like that, where Hisuian Typhlosion was the Terra guy. I've seen it do pretty darn well. Fire Ghost is a good offensive typing, obviously, but also defensively, you can pivot in a lot. I really enjoyed it when I used it in BBR season... What was that, season 6? The season before one? Yeah, I think it was that season. I actually really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the status spreading of it too, and spreading a ton of burns, so definitely a really cool Pokemon for sure. Next up is the Objective greatest starter in Johto, and it's going to be Big Gator. Shouts to Thomas. I'm recording this after watching his P4G game where he like super smoked Playmore with a mix for Alligator. But I mean, with Sheer Force, this guy's so strong, and I actually think this guy is genuinely viable as a Terra captain. Even if, like, your league is along, like, standard high-tier Terramons, like, if you want to do 2 mid-tier guys as Terra captains, this guy becomes stupefyingly strong with a Terra Water, and then on top of that, maybe, like, a Terra Ice, Terra Grass. SD sets are great with Aqua Jet, really strong Aqua Jets, but also, obviously, the Dragon Dance Sheer Force sets are going to be kind of your bread and butter, and they're going to be really strong. But again, you can do cool stuff like the mix sets with Sheer Force, moves like Focus Blast, which is a cool niche one, but you see a lot of Ice Beams, like, especially back in the day, with, like, a Tangrowth, you run, like, a Life Orb mixed Ice Beam set, and you're gonna smoke through that Tangrowth. It's gonna do a lot more than a +1 Ice Punch, so really cool mod. I love Gator. I've always had so much fun using it, and I would love to try it with Terra, personally, so definitely a really cool mod. Next up, we have some shitters. We're gonna go through them very quickly, right? I don't want to have this be a 40-minute tier list of me shitting on Furt, Noctowl, and Ledian, but these early gen guys, or these early Dex guys are... Man, are they bad. We're just gonna go ahead and put Fur down here. Again, it got tidy at this gen, which is a cool buff. Maybe if your team does, or your league does, like, really low tier Terra, I guess it could be viable, but I'm not gonna pretend like it's good. Same thing with Noctowl. Like, there's some cheesy stuff you can do with, like, Nasty Plod and Agility and stuff like that. And again, Terra makes everything, like, somewhat viable, but yeah, this guy's gonna be terrible no matter what. Terra will not save him, even if he was in the game. It would not save him. Ariados gets some kind of mention because of webs, but still... It's an Ariados, you know what I mean? Like, Webs is cool, Prio is cool, and both Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, but neither are Stab, so they're not strong Prio. I think you get SD? I don't know, Ariados is one of those mons that you kind of, like, draft when you first start playing, because you're like, it's cheap and it has Sticky Web, but it's pretty terrible. Next up, we have Crobat. Crobat's gonna go up here in A tier, too. Tried and true staple of Draft League. I miss it a ton this generation, but that speed tier, plus U-turn, plus taunt, plus defog, super fang, I mean, ultimate utility guy, And then there are some matchups where your Choice Band Brave Bird is going to smoke through some teams, be really strong. Plus, there's always the possibility of Nasty Bat with Hurricane, Sludge Bomb, Heat Wave, and you can be really, really strong in that regard. Really a staple of early gen draft too. I see a lot of Crobat and Oras and a little bit in Usum, because it really does do its job well, and kind of just being that fast pivot, Defogger, Super Fang Mon, Taunting Mon, like it does a great job of doing so. And with that speed tier, you can very often go incredibly bulky. So I definitely think it's great. Next up, we have Lantern. This is a hard one for me because for its price, no, I'm going to say it. For its price point, Lantern's an A tier Pokemon. Obviously, it is not better a lot of Pokemon that are going to end up in B. But for its price point, what it does is incredible. It is such a good defensive typing to have Water plus Electric. Having an immunity in both of those typings is, an immunity to both of those typings as well, in either Volt Absorb or Water Absorb, is absolutely incredible. Very free Volt switches, really solid spit off wall. In prior gens, you could Heal Bell and things of the sort, and like Toxic Protect sets were great too. And even like as a sneaky Scarfer, Lantern, for the price that it is, which is very cheap, is an incredibly good Pokemon. Great low tier Ice Resist, great Pokemon overall. Next up, we have Togetic. I think I at least have to put it in the bottom of C tier. In the past, especially, Togetic was drafted pretty commonly, I'd say, in back, at least in the Usum days when I started playing. Maybe was that, like, should it have been? Maybe not, but it was. I think it deserves its flowers for that. Low tier Defogger, Spread Thunder Wave is just a generally annoying and very bulky Pokemon. But it's also tough that your Fighting Resist, like, cannot take a knockoff. It's not allowed to at all, or it's, like, basically dead, so yeah, we'll put it in C. I think C is viable for it, for sure. At least in my opinion. We have another C tier Pokemon here in Big Xatu. We're gonna go ahead and put Xatu at the top of C tier. Not the best hazard deter, right? Like in like lower tiers in the past when it was really used as like that magic bounce guy. It kind of does so, but really a lot of rockers kind of smoke through Xatu. Like absolutely just body it. It's not the bulkiest thing in the world, but it does have its niche in that regard. It could be a solid Scarfer as well. There are some cheesy setup sets that you can run and potentially win with, but really it's kind of like a decent mid-tier like hazard deterrent. It could also defog if they end up going up, but not the worst Pokemon in the world. I do like Ampharos a lot. I think that it's really bulky for its price point. It has some cool coverage moves. It really struggles with grounds, or I would actually probably put it in B tier, because I think it's a really obnoxious Pokemon, and really annoying. Static is going to be great to spread, obviously, on physical attackers. Really punishes those U-turn Brave Bird spamming teams. I know Keegan had it for a little bit here in LTM and ended up dropping it, but I think it's still a very viable Pokemon. Speaking of very viable Pokemon, I'm going to put Ampharos in B tier. Now, so this is what I mean, right? We're like ranking these Pokemon based on their value, because Ampharos is obviously a better Pokemon than Lantern. The issue with Amphi is that if you're drafting Amphi, that's your Mega, right? And typically, Mega Pokemon are incredible. And settling for Ampharos, which isn't the worst thing in the world, that's why having a B tier, does have its downsides, because instead of getting Ampharos, you could have gotten, like, you know, Mega Scizor or something like that earlier in the draft, or something of the sorts. Even Mega Steelix, which we'll talk about later, because I love that guy. So, like, while I think Ampharos is great, it's bulky, it's strong. You can run, like, the Rest Talk Fabio sets. You can run Agility 3 attacks and try and win the game. There's definitely some cool things that it can do. It's just a little hard to justify drafting it in your Mega slot, in my opinion. As someone who's used it before and, you know, really enjoyed it, it's just a little bit tough to, you know, justify using. Also, Peep, Johto, we have 0 S tier Pokemon yet. Let's go Johto. The next game. Wait, let's go Johto hints? Okay. Next up we have Blossom. I think Blossom also deserves, like, a highish C tier. I've seen it do some really silly shit with Strength Stat plus Quiver Dance. Like that one game, I think it was TDG versus, I want to say II? It was either II or Hiker. I don't know which one of them. But it, like, super smoked with, like, a Mono Moonblast set into a team with a Steelix, because Steelix just could not break it. It was actually really funny to watch. It was a really cool set. So there's definitely, like, some cheese potential, but at the end of the day, you're still very frail. You're still a Blossom, and I feel like it requires some really shitty positioning from your opponent, or some really good positioning from yourself. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Next up, we have Azu, our first S tier Pokemon. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just the recency bias in Gen 9. I think Azu has been so good. The defensive typing is incredible, right? Water Fairy is so good. And then Pure Power on top of that, making it really strong, regardless of which you are invested, whether or not you go Choice Band or Belly Drum, like the standard, you know, I think of Azu, or if you're AV, or if you're Fizzef, or if you're Rest Talk. Really solid Pokemon. Incredible coverage too, with moves like Knockoff and things of the sort. Knockoff Ice Spinner, Superpower, things of the sort. I think it's still a Superpower. Might have lost that, but regardless, still great coverage. And then we have the opportunity to run like Thick Fat or Sap Sipper, like Perish Trap sets with like Whirlpool plus Parasong. Really makes the Pokemon incredibly solid, in my opinion. I absolutely love Azu. I think it matches up really well in Gen 9 in particular against the top end of the meta. It beats like all of the best Pokemon, really. Like literally all of them in a vacuum, it will beat them. So I think that's a really cool option for Azu, or a really cool aspect of Azu. And I think it's definitely worthy of the first S tier of our pick here, or of our tier list here. Unfortunately, we go right back down. Sudowoodo is going to go in D tier. I mean, Sturdy Rocks, he throws off really strong head smashes, but I mean, brother, it's a Sudowoodo. As much as I love the guy and I've drafted him before, he's a Sudowoodo. Next up, we have Politoed. Politoed's actually going to go on B tier. Now, value, right? Rain. Sets up Rain. That's awesome. Downside, it is much worse as a Rain set than the Pelipper. And the main reason for that being is that it does not have means of momentum. If they gave this guy Flip Turn, I actually think he would debatably be better, or at least on par with Pelipper. Because the biggest issue with Politoed is you're setting up Rain, but you're a momentum sucker. So we're having to pivot hard into our Rain offense that is typically functioning on limited turns. So either running like eject button sets, which is going to limit our Rain turns, or we're having to find positions to pivot into our Rain. And a lot of the time, the things that are checking the Rain are also going to check Politoed. So it makes it really hard to position and use, in my opinion. We can't do like the Whirlpool Perish Trap sets. Again, another Gen 2 thing is they all get Whirlpool and a couple of them gets Parasong and stuff like that. So that's a cool aspect of it. Sometimes offensive Politoads can go absolutely crazy. So that's pretty cool. But again, at the end of the day, it's a Politoed. And I think if you're drafting Politoed, you should not be drafting Hard Rain. Maybe Rain Aspect, but not Hard Rain in my opinion. Because I think it really, really struggles in that regard. Next up, we have Big Jumpluff. Jumpluff's also going to go in, like, D tier. I actually don't even really know what Jumpluff does. I think he gets Fast Strength Sap. I think Amel used him once and was like, yeah, this guy's the truth. So, if you're Amel, you can draft Jumpluff. Other than that, don't draft Jumpluff. Because it's terrible. Alright? Alright, on to the next. Dude, this is what I mean. Look at the stinkers of this generation. Johto lovers, I'm sorry. Your gen sucks, man. These guys are terrible. We're going to put Sunflora here, like, in the back of D. It's not quite Ledian bad, like, chlorophyll question mark, but, like, dude, again, you are Sunflora. I don't know how else to say it and how to be nicer, but you're a Sunflora, man. it's brutal. Quagsire is going to go at the top of B tier for me. Some people would debatably say A. I think Quagsire struggles a little bit in its passivity a lot of the times, and it's one of those Pokemon that is, like, always feeling like it's forced to spam recover if you want it to be around long term. And I think in Generation 9 in particular, too, that's a real downside to it with the recover nerf. But it's also one of those mons too. Very Gastron-esque, so I do think Gastron is better. Very Gastron-esque in the sense that if I'm Fizz-Def, I'm going to live the Fizz-Def hits I want to, but I'm going to crumble to a random Ice Beam. On the opposite, if I'm Spadef, I'm going to live the Spadef hits I want to, but a random close combat is going to do 70% to me, because my bulk actually isn't great. When you're invested in one of the two stats, it becomes a little bit more doable, and you'll take the hits, especially alongside Unaware. But really, those mixed wall breakers are going to absolutely smoke through Quag, or really just a life orb added onto whatever calc that you're trying to do, and it's going to 2-hit KO you after hazards if you're not boots. Like, and even then, if you are, like, you just got to click recover anyways, and they get a free switch into whatever smokes Quagsire, right? So, I do think it gained this would have been C tier for me, actually, if it did not get Rocks and Spikes and T-Spikes. I think that was a great addition to it. But, yeah, I'm not a big Quag guy. I don't know. Maybe I'm tripping, but not personally. Next up is probably the most overhyped Jamon of this gen in Johto, at least in my opinion, what I've seen. And it's mostly been like the YouTube scene, like the Wi-Fi scene. Man, it is my favorite evolution. My favorite evolution. Espeon is not that good, bro. It's not. It's really not. We talked about Xatu being a shitty hazard deterrent. Espeon's worse. It is 100% worse at that role. Now, that's not why you draft Espeon. You draft it because it's fast, strong, special attack. The coverage is terrible. It's still bad. I understand with Terra, it becomes immensely better. But I think it's another one of those mons that for those like double dance cheesy sets to really do well, your opponent has to either position awful or you have to position phenomenally. And I don't think it's worth the point allocation that it's typically getting in a lot of these Wi-Fi scenes and kind of the hype that it's getting. I personally probably would never draft an Espeon. I think it is much better than most of the things in C tier, because of that Mickey potential, and it definitely can Mickey. But man, I really do not think it is as good as people give it credit for. Now the Pokemon in C tier is going to be Umbreon. Umbreon keeping Toxic is the only thing that's keeping them B tier for me. I think it is very passive, very exploitable, not very good in the metagame right now. I think keeping Toxic is really nice. I was never a big Umbreon guy in the past either, but it always does its job. You just have to be very careful about letting its job get in the way of it being exploitable and passive. So, you know, that's that. Next up, we have Murkrow. Murkrow's gonna go in D tier. I mean, like, Tailwind, he's a cool guy in doubles, I guess, but, like, in singles, let's be honest, it's not great. Again, EV user weak to rocks, which means, like, can't hold boots and be bulky, which is a little bit unfortunate. And it really doesn't serve much of a purpose in a singles metagame. Really, like, that prankster bullshit is really just mostly, like, doubles-oriented stuff, but, you know, who knows. Next up, we have two goats. They're going right up in S tier. Slowking and... Not you, buddy. You'll have your time. And Galarian Slowking. I love these guys. I think these guys are absolutely incredible. Slowking is tried and true. It's always been good every generation draft. Regenerator is the best ability in singles draft league, and singles debatably in general, but in draft league in general, 100% the best. Slowking does what Slowking does, but a little bit more offensively, and I think it really saw a nice come up this generation with getting access to Toxic Spikes, and Chilly Reception for momentum. Both of these guys keeping like a pseudo teleport, which was what made them so good last generation too, is absolutely huge. They're phenomenal split F pivots with an AV, and even physically defensive, they're going to be great. OTR, like Trick Room weakness policy sets are great. Nasty Plot, Calm Mind, I mean, insane early gen coverage, so... They're obviously going to be incredible Pokemon, and I think they're genuinely phenomenal. I absolutely love both of these guys. I think Galarian Slowking's a little bit better. Slowking's a little bit worse, but regardless, both great Pokemon overall. I think I skipped Missy, or... Yeah, I think I might have skipped Missy, or it was just happened to be next up. Missy's going to go here probably in C tier. Pretty darn bulky ghost. Like, it can do Paratrap shenanigans. It's gonna check offensive fightings and things like that pretty decently well. Again, you gotta be careful about knockoff, but it also wishes things, it spreads status. It's pretty annoying, decently bulky. For its price point, at like 1-2 points, whatever you're getting it at, honestly not the worst Pokemon in the world, to be completely honest, so definitely okay. Next up, we have Wobbuffet. This also is gonna go in like a C tier. I think for its price point at forcing prep, is valuable in its own right? But am I going to pretend that Wobbuffet is good or reliable at its job? I don't think so. I think it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit much to pretend like it's actually a great Pokemon. But I have drafted it before. I think, channel member, Noah, Shatter Backboards, he drafted it with Terra one time, and it was actually really cool. So I think that's a cool aspect, right? If you get like a low point Wobbuffet, like that's forcing a ton of prep out of like, you know, 1, 2, 3 points or whatever it's at. So that's definitely really cool. And it's cool to see like this mon is considered broken in singles where you can't counter team, but obviously in draft it's considered pretty bad. Unknown. All right, we get one Pokemon worse than Ledian. There it is. Girafarig. So many shitty low tier Eviolite Pokemon, man. I'm gonna put this guy in D tier, I think. Like, I can't really see a universe in which this thing is, like, usable. I guess Farigiraf, like, it does similar things to Farigiraf, but again, you have to avoid knockoff like the plague. You're very passive. Like, you're not really doing much in your own right. You're not, like, a Wish Passer, really, because you're how, like, low your HP. I don't know. It's not a great Pokemon. I could not see a universe in which you would be like, man, I really want to draft Farigiraf. He's really cool. Unless you're a big Farigiraf guy. Then, if that's the case, more power to you. Same thing with, or not same thing. Next up, we have another one. I skipped it. I'm sorry. Dude, so many Eviolite Pokemon, though. I'm seeing, like, multiple as we go throughout this right now. But we have Big 4 in X. I'm going to put it in B. I know a lot of people put this in A, but I think Forretress is really bad in the role that people typically drafted, and that's going to be like Hazard Control, Hazard Spinner. I think it's good at getting up hazards on its own, especially like custom lead sets, kind of get up hazards, maybe boom once, who knows, like, you know, that kind of thing. But man, is it a terrible rapid spinner. It really loses to a lot of rockers in kind of like the war of attrition. Ghosts are really not threatened by it at all. We can Volt Out, I suppose. And again, really struggles on the Spit F side. Really bulky on the Fist F side, really struggles on the Spit F side. I think it is definitely usable. I have drafted it before within the last year and enjoyed it. But it enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would too. Sorry. Yeah, I'll just look at my phone, get a text. But still, it is a Forretress, and I think there are some pretty sizable downsides. Next up, we have the Dunsparce. I'm going to put this guy in C tier as well. For a low, like, 1-2 point you know, bulky EV like normal. Is it passive? Yes, but can it glare? Can it rocks? Can it even set up and Calm Mind and Coil? Yeah, it can, and I think that is kind of valuable in its own right. You know, we're gonna put it the. No, it's not a B tier Pokemon. I'm capping. I'm crazy right now. We're gonna put it there. Yeah, I think C tier is about a good spot for it. Next up, we have Gligar. I think this guy definitely deserves a B tier. At least in the sense of like its pedigree and draft in general. I think it's worse this generation because of no Roost, but it did gain access to Spikes this generation, which I think is a great tool. I think if this thing had Roost still, it might have bumped up to the top of B or even A. But in the past, great Pokemon. Toxic Immunity as well as Toxic Spreader knocks off things. U-turns is a great just bulky Eviolite ground type. Decently hard too. It's not the most passive thing in the world. And again, when you have moves like Knock Off and U-turn, you become infinitely less passive. You're very fast too, so you can taunt things and really prevent them from super taking advantage of you, which is always going to be nice. So I think Gligar's move pool and its speed tier really lend it to be a much better Eviolite user than the 8 million Eviolite users we have talked about up to this point. Next up, this is going to be another crazy one. I'm putting both Steelixes in A tier. No, I gotta put Mega Steelix in B tier. Now, obviously, Mega Steelix is a better Pokemon than Steelix. But I have Steelix in A tier. For its price point, for what it does, Steelix is so reliable and so good. If you look at any draft board in which Steelix is available to be drafted, it is going to be drafted in the mid-ish rounds because it is so good as a steel, as a ground, and as a rocker for its cheap price point. I love this guy. I think he's absolutely incredible. And while he is very, very Fizz-Dev, we can run Spidef Steelixes most of the time because the Fizz-Def is so freaking high. Mega Steelix, I love Mega Steelix. But again, I think you have to think about the opportunity cost with drafting a Mega. And there's usually a lot better options, especially with Steelix in particular. Mega Aggron is kind of just a better Steelix in my opinion. Obviously, you lose out on, you don't have like Stabby Q or an Electric Immunity. But Aggron's bulkier. It's pretty darn strong. It's still a great rocker. It's faster. Like it's just a little bit better of a Pokemon in my opinion, especially with like ID Body Press and stuff like that now. So I think when you're kind of outclassed as the low tier Steel type Mega, then you're kind of tough, and it's kind of tough to justify drafting. However, if you do and it fits your team well, I love it. I've drafted Steelix a couple times and it has always outperformed my expectations every single time. I love how strong that thing is. I think it's really, really cool. And again, you can ID Body Press with this thing and obviously become ridiculously, freakishly physically defensive. But there's even like Rock Polish variants and like Dragon Dance variants that you can totally run on Mega Steelix and get away with it. Or just like those strong offensive Rocks 3 attack sets and just do your job, especially if you can pass some wishes into it and keep it healthy. I mean, it's going to be a great Pokemon. So I'm definitely big on both Steelixes. I think that when it comes to value and bang for your buck, though, regular Steelix is probably your move. And it's another Pokemon I've drafted like 15 times. I love regular Steelix, man. Next up, so we're kind of moving through this decks right now. We have Big Gramble. I think Gramble is another Pokemon that is like B tier. I actually really like Gramble a lot. Intim obviously is going to be a great ability to have. Great physically defensive pivot. This guy is like patented like Ira Max Fizz-Def, Rocky Helmet. I switch it on physical attacker, then I Thunder Wave something. You get Super Fang. You have great offensive coverage, and there are some matchups where like offensive Grambles are cool, like bulk up sets. Even Choice Band variants are pretty cool. It's very slow. And it's not the most like bulky thing, especially on the Spadef side. That's again why you see a lot of like AV Grambles potentially sometimes. So it's not necessarily like a mon that's going to take over, but I think if you're getting a low tier fairy, I think Gramble is actually a really cool option. Really great Pokemon. Next up, we have the Qwilfishes. I'm gonna, dude, am I gonna put? I think I'm gonna put Qwilfish. Looking at these mons, I don't know. This feels so weird making a tier list and putting Qwilfish in A, man. It feels so weird making a tier list and putting Qwilfish in A. But like Johto's deck sucks, and I think for the value that you get from these little guys, they're incredible. I personally like regular Qwilfish more. While Hisuian Qwilfish is bulkier with an Eviolite, I love the item freedom of going Sash, of going Rocky Helmet, or whatever it might be, even like a Shuka Berry or something like that. I love that on regular Qwilfish. I also love the water typing. So I think these guys are great though in the aspect of the Thunder Wave. They spike, they T-spike. Oop. There we go. They T-spike, and they're damn good at their jobs. They're damn good at their jobs. Especially like Fizz-Def mons, they can Destiny Bomb things. They're fast, they can taunt, they have Aqua Jet priority. Like, I really love both of these mons. I think they're so good at what they do for their price point. It might be a little crazy, but I think that they're both A-tier Pokemon in context of the rest of this generation. I really do. I mean, I'm looking at B tier, and even some of these B tier Pokemon are terrible, and I wouldn't draft. Like, I wouldn't draft these back three guys like literally ever. I don't think. I really wouldn't. And I draft very seldom like little of the C tiers and none of the D tiers. So I guess that's the way we're measuring it. Next up, we have Scizor and Mega Scizor. We gotta put Mega Scizor at the top. I mean, they both do the same thing, but Mega Scizor is ridiculously good, especially as a like SD sweeper. They're both very bulky. They have one weakness. They U-turn, they knock, they bullet punch. They're great. I mean, Technician is a great ability, especially having strong priority, especially in Generation 9 for both these guys is great. Scizor losing knockoff or losing Roost in Gen 9 is tough, but I think it's kind of made people experiment with more offensive Scizors, more citrus variants, more like just like I go in, I U-turn on 4 attacks. I use this as a pivot and I don't play as passively, and I think it's gonna help people out because I think if people had the option to click Roost, they would probably run it too much, to be honest. I think it's a Pokemon that does not need it as much as I thought it would at the start of the generation when I saw it lost it. Mega Scizor is one of my favorite Megas. I absolutely love using it. I have a movie coming out in 2 days, probably 2 or 3 days, maybe on Friday, about a Oras team in which you have regular Scizor on, and I absolutely love using it there. It's again, just having that insurance in the back is always going to be a great thing. Next up, we have Shuckle. I mean, I'm sorry, we'll put him above everything in D. Like, there's the niche of like sticky web, rocks, haha. You know, I'm bulky and annoying kinda, but you're always forcing that like mental or like shenanigans. I think a good player is going to kind of account for Shuckle in some way, shape, and form, and be able to either exploit it or deal with it pretty handedly. So it's going to go down here in D tier. I don't think there's anywhere else it can go. Next up, we have Heracross and Mega Heracross. These guys are going to go up in A tier and S tier. Mega Heracross and S tier. Yes, I think this guy is in past generations, one of the most slept on Megas. This thing is so bulky. It's ungodly strong. It really has, there's no such thing as a Mega Heracross switch-in. I think if you can position it well, you get up hazards, and you come in, you click buttons on things that you're slower than, you're going to massacre teams. I also think that if you're playing Nat-Dex this generation, it's one of the best Megas in the game because of its access to Trailblaze now. The fact that Mega Heracross can boost speed now, it can get faster, is ridiculous. It is a Pokemon that is designed in a way that it's slow, but it's strong as hell and pretty bulky. Now we give it speed and it becomes ungodly broken. Like that plus like Mega Medicham is another example of that, right? Medi isn't even bulky, but it's ungodly strong. And it's not supposed to be able to boost speed. Now they can boost speed. And that's probably was why they got Trailblaze, because they weren't really thinking about Megas in that regard. Regular Heracross is still a great Pokemon. It's great with, Guts Flame Orb, Scarf Moxie, both great sets. It can spike, it knocks things off, it has a great stab combination. It's just an overall really, really strong Pokemon. Great Mon, for sure. Another text message? Leave me chat, tell them to leave me alone. I'm talking about Pocket Monsters right now. Jeez. Next up, oh no, I skipped. I really want to talk about them. All right, we're going to go ahead and put these guys at the bottom of C. The Sneasels are okay, low tier, fast mons. They're not ever running Eviolite, they're either on like sashes or bands or things like that. I think for their price point, the fact that you get decent speed is okay. I remember back in the day, I feel like Sneasel used to be drafted all the time, and I never see Sneasel drafted nowadays. So maybe someone needs to innovate and draft a Sneasel or something like that, but that guy sucks. Alright, next up, we got Big Bear, the guy I wanted to talk about, the man of the hour. I'm putting Big Bear in B tier, man. This thing, for its price point, how bulky it is great, right? With an EVO, pure normal typing, one weakness, but how strong this guy is after an SD, after a bulk up, with a Guts and a Flame Orb, because you decided, nah, screw the Eviolite, I'm clicking a button this game. It's ungodly good. I really love Bear. I think if you're looking low tier normals, it's also a great ghost check. It checks both Pult and Spec really, really well, especially with Guts and ability. I mean, great Pokemon. I absolutely loved using it in BBR the season we had it. It was also like my Volk wall. I was like Rest Talk, max Spit F with like Body Slam to check Volk, and it did so phenomenally. So overall, great Pokemon. I love me some Bear. And I think it's seen a big come up this generation. People absolutely love using it since it got the option to Eviolite at the very least. So great mon for sure. Macargo into D tier? Where's he gonna go? I'm not even gonna explain it. We're just gonna like eye test it. I say here. That's probably good for Macargo fast, right? Shell Smash, I guess, but slow, frail, not strong. He's a Macargo. And he's a fire. If I have any Macargo lovers in the comments, let me know. I apologize, but your guy's terrible. Big Piloswine next. We're gonna put him in B tier as well. I love me some Piloswine. I have an LTM right now. the epitome of reliable rocker, right? With an Eviolite in that bulk, and Oblivious is an ability, which you'll see in our upcoming week. Being immune to Taunt on that Pokemon and Intim is actually really, really valuable for Piloswine. Being able to guarantee get up rocks is a great quality to have out of a low point like Eviolite Mon. But on top of that, while you might not be strong based on 100 attack, like Earthquake, Icicle Crash, and Ice Shard are strong moves that don't have many common answers, right? There's really not a lot of teams that really appreciate switching into an Adamant Piloswine. There's not. Your water type might be able to take 2, but they're coming and taking 40, and you're like, yeah, my Piloswine just forged 40% on your water type, where you're either trying to recover it off now, or you just took 40% on your Piloswine, or on your water type, or something like that. It's incredibly valuable, really solid Pokemon. Next up, we have Corsola. Corsola is kind of... right here, I guess. Best ability of the game, still somehow terrible with regen, which is pretty crazy. I think Galarian Corsola at least deserves a nod in C tier. I'm not a fan of it, but with Eviolite, it becomes ungodly bulky. I remember early Gen 8, people thought this mob was super broken. And like they were leaks out in like tier 1 for the first like couple months, which is really fucking funny. Most of that was due to like Wi-Fi like not having LAN yet. So we were forced to play on the 20-minute timer, and that sucked. It was really hard to play on the 20-minute timer, so people were like, you can't draft bulky things. And they put Galarian Corsola in, like, tier 1. They're like, if you're drafting this shit, you gotta spend hella points on it. So nobody would draft it. But yeah, it's still a pretty terrible Pokemon, to be completely honest. So we're gonna put it in C tier. I think it's very exploitable, very passive. My buddy Jason would disagree, though. Alright, next up we have Octillery. Cool coverage. You can put it in the bottom of C. I think it's better than everything in D for sure. Cool coverage. Water's a cool typing. Its stats are just lackluster. It's slow. It's not that bulky. It's not that strong. So it's just kind of like one of those middling early gen mons. It's not great. Despite what the thumbnail would tell you, Delibird unfortunately is not going in S tier. He is probably going here. As someone who got a lot of kills with Dynamax Delibird, he's not fast and he's not bulky. Hustle makes him kind of strong, but he misses and he doesn't get off any attacks anyways. You can spike and spin, which is cool in Destiny Bond. Like, you have great like utility options. The only issue is that you're a Delibird, you know what I mean? So you give and you take. You give and you take. Next up is Mantine. I'm gonna put Mantine a little higher. Despite this being a Pokemon I don't enjoy personally. Like, I really don't enjoy Mantine. I think it has merit. That Spidef Wall, it can even function on rain teams pretty decently well. Spidef Wall, water immunity, defogger, things like that. It's always functioned decently in general. So yeah, pretty okay Pokemon. Skarm's got to go in S tier. As much as I'm a Skarm hater, its pedigree and draft has always been great, like especially in Oras and Usum, particularly Oras, one of the most reliable Pokemon in the metagame at setting up hazards and being a nuisance, being physically defensive, or sweeping with SD, if you're that one game from the greatest wheelchairs video. But it's kind of fallen off in recent gens because I think that it just becomes a lot more pressured and a little bit more passive, but still definitely usable, right? It gets some hazards, and especially as hazards have become a little bit less prevalent as we've gone from Oras to Usum to Swish to SV. But still, great Pokemon, you know? It's always been good. It always does its job. Great defensive typing. Steel Flying is one of the best typings in the game for a reason, so gotta give him its flowers. Next up we have Houndoom. I mean, fun low tier fire, but it's just like, I think the Typhlosions outperform it in the context of Gen 2 fire types. But still a cool guy. Love his design. Mega Houndoom. Speaking of guys from that last video, this guy is awesome. He's another Pokemon I really want to draft at one point. Like, I really want to draft Mega Houndoom at one point. It's ungodly strong. It's very fast. Sets up a nasty plot. It's going to put itself in a good position. Cool priority and Sucker Punch. You can even Destiny Bond things. Like, it has cool, like, niche, like, tech options, too, that make it, like, at least somewhat usable, which I think is cool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that we don't run out of space as we go. There you go. And you guys can see a little bit better the Pokemon that we're working with. Because I think we're about to get to that point where, like, we're running out of space. Especially in this B tier. But yeah, definitely a cool Pokemon. Alright, next up we have Big Kingdra. I think Kingdra's worth an A tier shout as well. Very niche Pokemon, right? Kingdra works on rain, that's it. Don't listen to anybody who's like, you could draft it for Critra and Dragon Dance. Nah, bro. You could, but you don't need to. Draft it on rain, or don't draft it. Respectfully. In the nicest way possible. But on Rain, it's oppressive. It's incredible. With Terra, it kills everything. And even in prior gens, whether it be with Gen 7 with Z moves, or just you throw specs on it, you click Hydro Pump, the entire game's getting 2 KO pretty much. Like, it's a very hard Pokemon to switch into, and really, really good if positioned correctly on Rain specifically, but it is niche to Rain specifically, so I don't think I can put it higher and, like, put it in S tier. But in the context of Rain teams, it's an S tier Pokemon. I think it's like almost a required draft, or required mon on a lot of Rain teams. Really, really solid Pokemon overall. Next up is the GOAT, the biggest come up of Generation 9, Donphan. He's going at the top of A. I don't think I can justifiably put Donphan in S tier, but this guy has seen such a big glow up in Gen 9, and it didn't even get anything new. People are just realizing that Donphan is a great rapid spinner, and it's kind of like carried over to all gens. Donphan's always been drafted, right? But I feel like this gen in particular, the reason I'm saying that, I see round 4 Donphans all the time, which, as a guy who's been playing drafts since 2017, that's crazy to me. That's a crazy, crazy pickup to me. But it makes sense. It's one of the few great spinners in this game, beats most rockers, smokes through most ghosts that are trying to rapid spin block with either knockoff or earthquake, and just does its job well. Physically defensive pivot, that's strong, and spins well, and also rocks really reliably. Sturdy's a great ability too, like Boot's sturdy stats are always going to be great. Next up is a Pokemon that I think is overrated, and people overrate the shit out of this Pokemon, and I'm here to stop it. We're going to put it in C tier still, right? Or in B tier still, in the context of the rest of this game. But Porygon 2 is not great this generation. And losing Teleport and losing Toxic made it very, very much so more passive. And even in older gens when it had those things, especially Gen 8, I think was Porygon 2's peak, I wasn't a big fan of it there either. It can be decently strong. It's not necessarily passive, but I think it's exploitable, I guess is the way of putting it. It's going to check the things it wants to check, but it's really going to struggle with everything else. I don't know, maybe it's just me being a Porygon 2 hater. It's definitely better than most of the mons in Gen 2, but I think for its value, I think it's very overpriced and overrated right now. I'm not big on it, so I don't know, maybe that's just me. Next up we have Stantler. Stantler's cooler than Girafarig because it has Intim, but they're both terrible. Don't draft them. Please don't. Smeargle, I think Smeargle at least deserves the bottom of C. We've seen some cool usage out of it lately, and like Viz using it in a BBR. I saw Shuckle run a really cool set with like Burning Bulwark in, what do you call it? P4G recently against Callum week 1. That was definitely pretty sick. But overall, I think the Pokemon is not great. You're either Mental Herb to not get taunted on lead, which means that you can just get good if you're not Sash, right? So it's kind of just like a guessing game, kind of figuring out what you want to do. I'm sure there are positions where you can kind of account for both, but I feel like it's very hard, especially in such an offensive metagame. You're not fast, you're not strong, you're not bulky, obviously. That's the whole point of Smeargle. You can learn every move. But it becomes a little bit harder to use, in my opinion, because of that. I don't know. Maybe I'm tweaking. But then we have Hitmontop. Hitmontop is going to go probably up here in like a high-ish B tier. I'm going to put it above Forretress because it's a better spinner, and people draft them for the same reason sometimes. I think Hitmontop really struggles offensively a lot of the time, whereas it switches in what it needs to and it takes the hits that it needs to. But on those ghosts and psychics, it really struggles dealing with them. I wish it would have gotten knocked off like Hitmonchan. I wish it would have gotten a knock off like Hitmonchan, but it didn't. It's just so unbelievably sad. But with an AV, it's cool. I actually think the best Hitmontop sets are actually Technotop. Like the AV offensive technician sets are really, really cool and really, really strong, honestly, and really difficult to deal with a lot of the time. Whereas I think the Intim sets are a little passive and a little bit meh. But overall, it's definitely a lot better than most Pokemon here. But yeah. Next up, what do we have? What do we have? Oh my gosh, I'm losing track there. Look at all the baby Pokemon. There we go. Big Miltank. Miltank definitely deserves a B tier shout. Definitely, again, another Pokemon that is very solid and reliable at what it does. Dude, I ran out of room. I thought it was good. Alright, let's try this. Hold on. As we kind of talk about Miltank. There we go. When you guys say they see Umbreon, that's the end of the row, so it'll go below it. Yeah, but Miltank, again, reliable what it does. Good ghost check. Scrappy is a great ability for it. Thick Fat is a great ability for it as well. Really fast for its for how bulky it is, which I think is the most valuable thing about Miltank. I really love how fast it is for how bulky it is. Base 100 speed is great. It rocks at T-Waves, it seismic tosses. It's just a general nuisance, you know? Very solid Pokemon. I think it was always good in older gens. I think it would struggle in a Generation 9 metagame, but we don't have any reference point for that, so we'll just talk about it as if it's here. Next up is Blissey. I think I'd be capping if I put Blissey any lower than A tier. As much as I hate the Pokemon, I do not like Blissey, I don't like Chansey. I think they suck. But in the context of the rest of this generation, is definitely one of the better Pokemon here. If used correctly, it is solid. I can't use it, and I actually never struggle with it playing it either. But it does what it's supposed to pretty darn well, and I think putting it in A tier is valid. All right, next is one that's gonna this one's gonna be interesting, right? We have Raikou, who is probably my favorite of the legendary beasts, right? But I think it sucks. I genuinely think it sucks. I'm gonna put it in B tier. It's gonna be pretty high in B tier. I'm gonna put it right here. I actually like Mega Steelix as a Pokemon better. I think Raikou really struggles this generation. One is it losing Toxic. I was talking with Addison about it because she has it in LTM. She thinks that doesn't make a big difference. I think losing Toxic on this thing is huge, because at least forcing a Toxic on your checks so you can Volt Switch around later is really valuable, right? We kept Scald, but without Toxic, we don't check Grass, or we can't beat Grasses, we can't beat Dragons, and we also just don't do enough damage initially, right? Calm Mind is cool, but those things that naturally check us are going to check us at +1, and otherwise our Volt Switches are kind of bouncing, right? And plus, you're always in a position where you have to guess the Ground type coming in and Scald, or Volt Switch on the Grass or Dragon coming in, because you want to maintain momentum and initiative, and I think it makes Raikou really awkward to play. I think with Terra, it's incredible, but without Terra, it's a little bit tough. Like, Terra Fairy sets, fire. Super good. I really like Terra Fairy sets. I think Ashley used Terra really well in, what do you call it? TGS, but not big on it overall. Entei's also going to go in B tier. I like this guy. I think he's cool. Contrary to what Kaz would tell you, because I think we discussed this a while ago. He thinks this guy's terrible. I think he's fun. I think he forces a lot of progress and damage on his own checks. You burn things with Sacred Fire, you get out. I think with Terra, he could be awesome. Like Terra Fire, Sacred Fires, just Terra Normal E-Speeds. Really, really valuable. He's kind of one of those Pokemon that just like slowly pushes through their own checks over time. And I think that's definitely cool. And then Suicune. Suicune's going to go in A tier. Do I think Suicune is where it's been in the past? No. I think Suicune was much better in Generation 8, 7, and 6. Generation 9, I haven't seen it do great yet due to it losing those sub-toxic sets or those toxic Restock sets, which I think is definitely pretty brutal, but it's still good at what it does. It still Calm Minds, protects, and subs. Pressure stalls you out of what you're trying to do, and it breaks through you over time. And I think it's a Pokemon that requires good prep from the opponent to beat. It's really, really centralizing. It's also just really freaking bulky, man. Even if you're not using Suicune as a sweeper, if you're using it just to like scald and roar things, it's going to be great at that job. So I think that alone makes it A tier. Maybe if it was a little better this generation, we put it in S tier, but I don't think it's that good. Next up, we have T-Tar and Mega T-Tar. I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to put these guys in S tier. I know some people would like kind of disagree with them being that high, but I think they're great. I actually really love these Pokemon. T-Tar, great on sand teams, very versatile, AV, banded, things like that. Mega T-Tar on its own, I don't think it's like a good sand setter for the rest of the team, but for itself, it's great to get the Spadef boost. The Pokemon is so bulky, it is so strong, and it is so versatile. Whether it be mixed sets, rock sets, Dragonite sets, rock polish sets, I mean, just 4 attack sets because you kill everything. Great Pokemon, especially now that they have knockoff. Like, great addition to their move pools. And then we have Celebi. There's a lot of Celebi haters in the world. I'm not one of them. I'm going to put Celebi here in B tier. I think it's really solid. Yeah, 4 times weak to U-turn. Don't take a fucking U-turn. Just don't take U-turn. Other than that, it's a great Pokemon. The mythical base 100 stats across the board is great. Incredible move pool, T-Wave and Healing Wish and Rocks and things like that, which is great. It U-turns around. And it can also even set up and sweep and do some fun things that way. Reliable recovery, Heal Bell. Like, it's a good Pokemon, man. It is a genuinely good Pokemon. We're not going to rank Ho and Lugia because they are banned. And that is our tier list for the day. Let me know what you guys think. I think this one is a lot more like up in the air, depending on like how you view Pokemon and things like that, and how you kind of like approach these kinds of things. But I think that this is pretty accurate, and it's also crazy to show like how much worse this deck is. Most of these guys in B tier are not in B tier in any other Pokedex. Most of them are not in B in any other Pokedex. I think the cutoff line is like after Ursaring, personally. But again, we're ranking them as Johto Pokemon, so I want to, you know, kind of rank them as such. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment. Let me know what your favorite Gen 2 Pokemon is in Draft League. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot for putting your favorite Pokemon in C tier or D tier. And with that being said, I'll see y'all next time. Later.